cell phone and electronic devices are turned off. If you're not talking about police consent.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Ready to bring in the jury? Mr. Dreicer?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Welcome back, members of the jury. Everyone may be seated. Mr. Dreicer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'd like to also talk to you about, this jacket has no evidentiary value to whether Mr. Fernandez is connected to the homicide of Jared Bridegan. I think we can all acknowledge that. This big box of boots that you've seen us sort of manhandle around the courtroom trying to get it on, and it was brought over there, has no evidentiary value to whether Mr. Fernandez was involved in the homicide of Jared Bridegan. So why was it important? Why did I take the time to show that to you? Because all of the surveillance is in evidence. And I want you to take the time, if you so choose, to look at any one piece of surveillance that shows Henry Tenon. And I picked out for you right here, can you go back and play it one more time? What I believe is the clearest, where you can see Henry Tenon the most clear. And she just stopped it. And you tell me, after watching that video, which I submit to you is the clearest, but if there are others that you think are more clear, that you believe that you can tell that this is the jacket that has over his shoulder, whether it's a jacket at all or a blanket, whether he's wearing white sneakers, not these boots, the purpose is they don't know. But they keep telling you these half-truths. They keep trying to get your imagination to connect the dots. So they frame a jacket that was found at Potomac and tell you, this is the jacket. They put a pair of old boots in a big box so it looks like they have a lot of evidence to connect Mr. Fernandez to this crime, to make it look like they've done their job and met their burden, when they haven't. When you look at that slide and you say to yourself, there's no way you can tell. It could be that jacket, but there's no way that we know it's that jacket. We know there's no way we know it's the boots. Then ask yourselves, why are they doing that? Why not just say, like they did in their first close, we're not really sure, that's your job. Why not put all the jackets that they found in the garage and say, it's your job to determine if it matters what jacket he's wearing? Why not put in all of the boots that they found at Potomac and say, it's your job, you determine what boots he's wearing? They're not doing that repeatedly. They're trying to force evidence on you to get you to connect dots that simply do not exist. Detective Johns arrested Henry Tenon on August 18th, and they told Jeremy Ordway that he was arrested in connection with the murder of Jared Bridegan. And why that's such an important fact is there's a flutter of phone calls amongst Mr. Fernandez and Shanna Gardner. If he just got arrested for a driving while license suspended or revoked, there'd be no reason for a flutter of phone calls. But when they tell the current tenant that the person who is his best friend and a family friend of his father's for 20 years, which is another thing they keep telling you, like he never moved out, he just continued to stay there. His best friend moved in, a family friend of Jeremy Ordway's. That's the connection of why Henry Tenon appears at Potomac. It has nothing to do with Mario Fernandez, it has to do with Jeremy Ordway. But because they told Jeremy Ordway that, and they asked Jeremy Ordway to conduct a controlled phone call, of course there's a flutter, because they told them that they were investigating the homicide of Jared Bridegan, and it would be weird if Jeremy Ordway didn't call Mr. Fernandez and say, did you know that this has something to do with your wife's ex-husband? That makes sense. Again, this is all the jackets. This is all the shoes that they could have shown you, and they chose not to. February 8th, Mr. Fernandez's phone is seized. He was cooperative. And when they pull him over, I asked, he didn't know you were going to pull him over. No. Did you find any evidence connected to the crime? And the answer is repeatedly no. We didn't find any evidence. And I will talk to you about the Pennsylvania trip, but they continue to show you something, and then when asked, did it connect? No. Was Mr. Fernandez cooperative? Yes. Did you get what you were looking for? Yes. And then when they arrest Mr. Fernandez, he's arrested without incident, no running, no fleeing, no violence, no gun found, nothing. Nothing that connected him to the crime of the murder of Jared Bridegan. Ms. Kudis, I don't know why the government chose not to tell you my first question. You used to have a fling with him. Yeah, that's right. But why didn't they tell you that? That's an important detail when you're judging someone's credibility. That makes more sense why he would share information with her about their high conflict. She would call him to ask his advice about her high conflict advice. And then lastly, she said, toward the end, I felt like he was sort of feeling me out to see if I was interested in a relationship again. Doesn't that make more sense when they used to be in a relationship? And then when it turns out that she really wasn't interested, they didn't have that much more contact anymore. But she doesn't report him to law enforcement. She doesn't call and say, hey, he said some weird things about his marriage. No, law enforcement shows up at her house and they ask her questions about the homicide. And then she's like, yeah, I did know Mario Fernandez. And she says, which are from conversations that were years prior that she never wrote down and admitted they were not verbatim. I asked, she commented about some contract in the marriage, and I said, did you know that they had, I probably said prenup by accident, a postnuptial agreement? That's a contract. No. Did you know that he was the trustee of the family trust? No. She said there was some issue between the Gardner family, yes, the very wealthy people, and him being the trustee. That makes perfect sense with the limited information that she had, is that he was the trustee of the family trust. Then you heard from Mr. Quiroz. Someone will have to explain this to me one day. They tell you that one day Mr. Fernandez goes, he Googles a place that he's heading, which I think is pretty consistent with what people do. Then he goes up to North Carolina. Mr. Quiroz tells you, he texted me a few days before. He said, hey, I'm coming up that way. Do you want to get together? They go to Ruby Tuesdays. He uses his credit card. They go to dinner. He uses his phone. He doesn't turn his phone off. He doesn't have a bat phone or a secondary phone. He says, I'm going up to visit friends up north. He ends up going up north. He stops and he buys some shampoo and toiletries at Walmart. This is somehow evidence that they took time to show you that Mr. Fernandez is connected to the murder of Jared Bridegan. This is the part of the trial, folks, where you were waiting for that shoe to drop. You had to have been thinking, all right, we've heard from this guy, we've heard from this guy. Nothing really connects Mr. Fernandez. It's got to be coming. Here's the receipt where we got the rope, the duct tape, the silencer, the gun, something that connects Mr. Fernandez to a crime. That's the part in murder trials where they're like, gotcha. You went to a random Walmart that no one thought you would be at, and you bought a bunch of supplies that are consistent with killing someone. Something that could make you think that Mr. Fernandez is connected. He was on a road trip that he had planned, that he told people about, that he used his credit card and bought his phones, and he went to Walmart and bought some shampoo. That's what they told you. And then he went to Pennsylvania, and he left, and somehow it was some big deal that he booked a hotel for 2 nights, but only stayed 1, until Mr. Hill got up there and said, what time is checkout? 11. What time does the cellular data show that he left the area? I don't know, like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Every single one of us knows that when you go to a hotel, if you stay past, 11, 12, maybe you get an extended checkout, 1, 2 o'clock. But after you stay after that, you have to pay for the second night. So if he was in the area visiting friends and had his things in that room until a certain period of time, or whatever the case may be, decided that he likes to drive through the night because there's less traffic, so I'll sleep in, I'll stay until 7 or 8, and then he came back to Jacksonville in March. And then they just sprinkle in. That's when the twins were being interviewed. You guys have heard that. He went up there, and that's when the twins were being interviewed. Folks, what have you heard that is some negative inference that the twins said anything that would make Mr. Fernandez think that he was in trouble and would have to flee? And I don't know who flees to Pittsburgh. He didn't go to Tijuana. He didn't go to the border of Canada and camp out. He's in Pittsburgh. And then they just sprinkle in, that's when the twins were interviewed. What piece of negative information have you heard that the twins said anything that would incriminate Mario Fernandez? And the answer is none, not a peep, zero evidence. So somehow they took time to tell you about a trip where he went to Pennsylvania and met up with a friend. And I just suspect you were wondering, why did we hear this? What was the purpose? Because as Mr. Fernandez's criminal defense lawyer, who's been on this case since day one, I have no idea what evidentiary value him going up to Pittsburgh and coming home in March of 2022 has anything to do with this case, except for the fact that we know he bought toiletries on a road trip. Then you heard from an analyst that they flew in from Maryland to go step by step through every little piece of evidence, who just told you there's no DNA that connects Mr. Fernandez to the crime or the murder of Jared Bridegan. Bottom, end, period, stop, nothing. Not one piece. Then you heard from Mr. Stengel. Do you remember when the government, I keep telling you about these half-truths and not whole stories that you heard. Do you remember when the government said, and Agent Stengel, did you find a gun accessory when you went to John Biggerstaff's house? Yes, I did. Here it is. We're about to find, the shoe's about to drop, folks. We're going to get that piece of evidence. I found a gun cabinet. All right, this is the point in a murder trial where they show you that they found the gun or evidence of a gun. Nope. I have to get up on cross-examination and stand there and look at him and say, you found a gun accessory? Do I understand that you found an old, rusted-out gun cabinet on a back porch? Yes. That thing didn't even shut, did it? No. You found garden tools in it. That's correct. That was the gun accessory? That's the kind of evidence that they're showing you to try to connect Mr. Fernandez to a firearm that's phantom in this case. That John Biggerstaff had a garden tool in an old rusted out cabinet on his back porch. And then he told you that he was one of the agents that was responsible for finding the F-150 at Jimmy Jones's house. This has got to be the most inept part of the entire investigation. They want you to believe that Mr. Fernandez is somehow connected to a gun that legally had to be disposed of in 2016. But they find the number one most important piece of evidence that they had been looking for, that had been blasted out on the news. Which, remember, they keep saying, well, Mr. Fernandez never reported the F-150. Well, either did the person who was in possession of it. So we had no reason to believe that he was a suspect. He was nice to us. I talked to him for like 8 minutes. He was a good guy. He's in possession of the most important piece of evidence that they found in this case. He said, you can search my house. And they don't search the house? What's more reasonable where you would find the homicide weapon located in this case? Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. But we all agree that if the truck was hidden there, the murder weapon could be hidden there. The motive could be hidden there. The reasons could be hidden there. Jimmy Jones could be involved. They have no idea. They didn't investigate him. You didn't hear from him. You have no idea the connection of Jimmy Jones to this case, other than they just want you to believe, oh, Henry Tenon asked me to keep the vehicle here, and I had no problem doing it. Case closed. It's all cool. Mr. Hill had to get up and be like, how many people have told you, you can search my car because they don't want you to think they have anything to hide, and then you find a kilo of coke in the trunk? That happens. It does happen. No investigation whatsoever. Don't go to the pawn shops where the 10 millimeters are and ask follow-up questions. Don't go inside the home where you actually find evidence in this case. And number one most important fact of this entire scenario is that that truck at that location, Jimmy Jones's house, isn't connected to Mario Fernandez at all. Stop, period, no evidence. None. He is not connected to the place where that truck was found, and they did nothing to determine the relevance of where that truck was found. Never heard from Jimmy Jones, never searched his house. He never called it in. Then you heard from Carlos Sonny Fong. Mr. Fong calls Mr. Fernandez. That call is in evidence. Please listen to it as many times as you want, because it never says anything that they told you it says. You heard today Ms. Stifler tell you that Mr. Fernandez was willing to pay $3,000 to remove one tree. That's what she said. So how it would be unreasonable that he would pay Mr. Tenon $2,500 for tree work. Excuse my language. This is what the call says. During COVID, they wanted $3,000 to remove a tree. Fuck that. That's what he says. He does not want to pay $3,000. And then he goes on to talk about the checks. When he calls Mr. Fernandez doesn't deny. That would be great evidence. If we know there's a connection between Mario Fernandez and Henry Tenon, and then his friend calls and says, hey man, do you have any connection to this guy? No, never heard of him, no reason. He's like, yeah man, the guy did work for me. He was a workhorse. He did lots of work. First check, keeping up with the roof, $3,000. Not a shred of evidence in this case that Mr. Tenon didn't do roof work for Mr. Fernandez, okay? The call between Sonny Fong that they did not know was recorded was 11 months after the homicide. 11 months. Second, $2,000, landscaping clearing. Now let's hear what happened on the call.
Like, he was working for me for a bit, like, after it.
Oh, really? For real?
Yeah, yeah. Like, he helped me, like, that's a fucking quarter-acre lot. And like, he did a lot of fucking work, dude. Like, he fucking took down trees and shit and fucking mowed that bitch, and then he did roofing. Like, I don't fucking get it.
I don't know anyone that's that good. On a call that he didn't know was being recorded, either party, 11 months later, he says, did you know him? And then he says, yeah, he did a lot of work for me. A quarter-acre lot. I don't even know if they're talking about Potomac, because Mr. Fernandez also owned Whitehorse and other properties at the time. He did a lot of work for me. Not one piece, not one tree. He mowed that bitch. He took down trees. He did roof work for me. Mr. Fernandez is so good that he had the opportunity to, on an unrecorded call, recall the exact or close to it memo lines of the work that Henry Tenon did for him after the homicide. There's not one part of that call that's inconsistent with those checks. It is the most consistent piece of evidence in this case that Henry Tenon did legitimate work for him, and they get recorded on a call talking about it. And then there's a part of the call where he's like, yeah, I don't remember everything. It would be really weird if he talked every single specific detail. The government's like, well, he didn't say the Kickstarter. I mean, we'll get to the Kickstarter checks in a minute, but I'm going to suggest to you that no one is that good. And the reasonable inference is that he actually did legitimate work for him after the homicide because Mario Fernandez knew he needed money and Henry Tenon was willing to do the work, and he did it. In opening statement, Ms. Stifler said, "You will not hear any evidence from the downloads of Henry Tenon's phones or Google accounts that have ever had anything to do with the Kickstarter. You will see very quickly these are not legitimate payments." Again, who is this good? Scouring tens of thousands of records, we were able to show you that the week prior to Mr. Tenon receiving this Kickstarter money, he's Googling business plans for pallet companies. He then writes out a business plan. He then, while at the time period that Mr. Tenon is at the house, he gets arrested. He can't control when he's going to get arrested. A pallet truck, while Mr. Fernandez is there, pulls up in front of the house. I don't know who can plan this. I mean, this is insane. There's a Google search history of starting a company a week before he gets a Kickstarter money. Pallet trucks show up at the house and stop after he's arrested. And inside, these are the Google searches, okay, showing the business plan that he was obviously trying to impress Mr. Fernandez with by getting a little bit of money that meant nothing to Mr. Fernandez in the grand scheme of how much money he had access to. And then they've not decided to go in and show you what the business plan and the numbers were. Is this real or fake? Look at the dates, folks. Right around the time of the checks, 3/31, 4/1, 2022. At the time, no one could have assumed that they would ever find this. And look at Mr. Tenon's. It has the number of pallets. It has the unit price. It has the totals. It has the dates. It has the numbers. All consistent with what you would need, which is about $5,000 or $6,000. All listed out, all with the dates from before he got the checks to getting the checks to after he received the money. No one is this good, folks. It suggests to you that it's real, that that's what the money was for. Mr. Tenon was helping him. He was doing a lot of work for him. I'm sure if Mr. Tenon wanted to start a pallet company and Mr. Fernandez gave him some money, it was in advance for him to continue to do work for him. That's what's happening here. It's $5,000 to a guy who has access to hundreds of thousands of dollars from the trust in his own personal accounts. This is not a great deal of money to Mr. Fernandez. It was a great deal of money to Mr. Tenon, and Mr. Tenon clearly tried and did the work for the pallets in which he needed the money for. Next. Then you heard from Mr. Blythe, or Agent Blythe. Until I got up and I said, "Are these things peer reviewed?" "Yeah." "How many drafts did you do?" 5. 2 finals? "Yeah." And there were still mistakes on it. First degree murder case. They're trying to put my client in prison for the rest of his life.
Your Honor, object.
Sustain.
This is a first degree murder case. It's the most serious case that you can be indicted for in the state of Florida. There is no more serious of a crime. And they want you to believe that Mr. Fernandez's phone was off because there's one gap in data during the time of the homicide. But it's the defense that has to show you that the same records that they were relying on to come up with that information comes with a warning. The warning says, even if call records are found, which some were, there may be times when no timing advance records are available. Please use caution in using these records for investigative or prosecutorial purposes. It's exactly what they're doing in this case. They're taking one missing record, which T-Mobile tells you you shouldn't do because there are missing records. And then when I ask him about it, this is what he says. Well, on direct examination, when Ms. Stifler asked, any rhyme or reason as to why no timing advance measurements? Answer. Could be engineering product, can't map it, no location, no TA recs recording, can't say with certainty. We need certainty. The jury instruction says you have to have certainty. And yet, in this case, he cannot give you certainty as to why there's one missing TA record at that time. And then it took the defense on cross. I said there can be blocks of time where the network engineers just don't record TA for a particular market area. That's correct. And that's what they're asking you to rely on, to know that his phone was off. And then when I asked, do you know if his phone was off? No, I can't say. Circumstantially, it may have been an airplane made, or the engineers at the company, for whatever reason, just didn't receive timing records. And then when I showed all of the timing records for the whole night, I showed there's another 52-minute gap. They didn't tell you that. And I said, if you took that 52-minute gap and you put it on a slide, wouldn't it look identical, that there's no information? Yes. So what does the government do? They get up in their first close and they say, I wish they would have mapped that, because there could be another reason why at that time period it connects Mr. Fernandez to the crime. No, it doesn't. T-Mobile doesn't get records timing advance all the time. There are gaps for engineering reasons. Exactly what Agent Blythe told you. Blocks of time where the network engineers just don't record TA records. T-Mobile tells you that with a warning, and then all the records show. But they didn't show you other nights. Mr. Hill got up and he asked a witness later, did you look to see if there were identical times where there were no records for that time period? Yeah, I found 4 other ones with the exact time period. Now, there were some calls and texts during that time, but the phone had no TA records 4 times, 30 days prior, 30 days post of the exact time. And they want you to look at the jury instruction that says a forced doubt, an imaginary doubt. They're asking you to create evidence in your mind that doesn't exist. The evidence is you can't use it because it's not reliable and it's not used for prosecutorial purposes. That's why T-Mobile didn't come into this courtroom and tell you anything. He can't say whether Mr. Fernandez and Henry Tenon were even together on January 29th when they arrive at Potomac. Henry Tenon is there. Mr. Fernandez arrives, and when I said, do you even know if they're there at the same time? I can't say for certain. They could have been. I asked Detective Johns, you don't know that they were there at the same time. Could have been. And I'm like, what's the opposite of could have been, Detective Johns? That they could not have been. I mean, how hard was it for me to get that out of him? They don't know. The technology isn't that good, but if they were there together, it's like a minute or 30 seconds max. Otherwise, they're just 2 ships passing in the night. And why would there be 2 ships passing in the night on January 29th? Because it's 2 days after Mr. Fernandez signs the lease with Jeremy Ordway, and all of the things were being moved to the garage. It's not at all unusual that a landlord would go at the end of the month when there's a new tenant coming in and an old tenant leaving and moving all of his stuff to the garage to make sure the house is in whatever order the new tenant expected it to be in, or for the other 20 times in one singular month that we know Mr. Fernandez went there to do work. And we know that he was there when tenants were there and when they weren't there, because we pointed out every time a tenant would leave or come. And we also know that on the next date that we're going to talk about, Agent Blythe agreed that there were times when on the 15th, when Mr. Fernandez was at the house, Mr. Tenon left 29 minutes before Mr. Fernandez did. So there's plenty of facts to suggest that Mr. Fernandez would be there when Mr. Tenon was not. And Mr. Agent Blythe, again, found no evidence that Mr. Fernandez or his device was ever with Henry Tenon when Henry Tenon was doing whatever it is that he was doing on that day connected with the homicide. This is the night of the homicide, and what Agent Blythe talked about is that there's no evidence that his device ever left his residence, and we talked about whether his phone was off or not and the certainty in which he could say that. Now, this is the part of the trial, if you recall, where I brought to your attention that Henry Tenon had 2 phones. And then I talked about where those phones connected and that they were separated. And the common sense would be that if at some point in time they were calling each other, they weren't together. So whoever was involved in this homicide that night with Henry Tenon had the other phone. If they want you to believe that Mario Fernandez was that other person, although there is no evidence to believe that, why would Mr. Fernandez turn off his phone? He had no history of turning off his phone, and Henry Tenon would have given him the other phone. It doesn't make any sense. They're just asking you to fill in gaps because they can't do it. The other person had Mr. Tenon's other phone. That phone connects over by Mojos, and there's not a suggestion in the world that Mario Fernandez was ever anywhere out of his home on that night. You heard from Mrs. Butler. She's the one who said that Mr. Fernandez deleted a bunch of stuff from his phone right before his police interview. We know that Mr. Fernandez was involved in a sex tape and had lots of personal things on his phone. He cooperated. He gave his DNA. No reason to believe a person would not expect that they would ask for the phone. Why they didn't ask for his phone, that's your decision to make as to what kind of thorough investigation they did. They don't know what he deleted. They don't know if it was porn websites, which you saw Ms. Butler. She said, look at all these things he deleted. I saw you guys leaning in, looking. You saw the contents of the websites that he deleted. All reasonable things that if law enforcement was to take your phone, you may not want really the world to know what you're looking at in the privacy of your own home. But not a shred of evidence with all of her detail, with how good she was, with the precision that she was able to go through these records, that anything that was deleted had anything to do with the homicide of Jared Bridegan. Next. Oh, she talked about the search of John Biggerstaff, the thumbnail that she says that she doesn't know whether he clicked on or not. And it wasn't even the right firearm. It was the 9mm as well, and all the other searches that John Biggerstaff either looked at or had thumbnails of. And you heard from Mr. Ostertag. He's a JSO detective. He was in the digital forensic, and the big theme that they had with him was Mr. Fernandez, he wiped his phone. So all those months later, where they never collected his phone, and when they did, he was cooperative, he turned it over, they wanted you to believe there was some evidentiary value that he wiped his phone until we got up on cross-examination. You saw scrambling over there. I went over to Miss Day. I said, get me the date that they say his phone was wiped. I bet you there's a T-Mobile purchase. Sure enough, T-Mobile, he got a new phone. That's what happened. Everyone wipes their phone when they get a new phone. They keep saying different things like, he wiped it, he got a new phone and device, and they showed you that on T-Mobile, but he kept it. That's weird. There is no evidence whatsoever that anything was unusual other than 8 months or so after the homicide, or 6 months or so after the homicide, he got a new phone and he wiped his old phone. That's what happened. The IME numbers are totally different, and that was the evidence in this case. This is the gentleman from ATF who said that he believed it was a Glock. I'm sure it was. He believed it was a 10mm. I'm sure it was. He seemed to know what he was doing. Can't connect it to this case at all. Doesn't even know if it was a Generation 44. They make 3 different models. Can't say what model it was. Tens of thousands of 10mm Glocks in circulation since 1991. That's what he was able to tell you. Next. Then you heard from Mr. Barton. And even the government said there's got to be truth in there somewhere. Who cares what the truth is with these 3 guys? The truth is, Fred Barton says the guns were dropped off and it was in a gun cabinet. Juan Biggerstaff says the guns were all dropped off in gun cases and appropriate gun boxes. John Biggerstaff says, I was a convicted felon, couldn't be anywhere near them, had to get rid of them. Who told you anything that any of those stories had anything to do with Mr. Fernandez. This is the part of the trial, folks, where you're waiting for the shoe to drop and you're like, all right, someone's going to take the stand. They're going to be offered immunity, which means they can't be prosecuted. They can tell you the truth. And they're going to put their chin to their chest and they're going to say, I didn't know it was going to be used for that purpose. I regret what I did, but I did give somebody a firearm, or whatever the case may be in every murder trial where they attempt or they can establish a connection between whatever evidence they put on for days at a time and the defendant. They didn't do that in this case. John Biggerstaff, first question I asked him, you heard Mr. Mizrahi ask you all these questions about your guns. Where are they? But he didn't ask him the one question, did you give Mr. Fernandez a 10 Miller firearm? No, I didn't. I haven't seen those guns since 2016. I asked him every which way. I even tried to trip him up. I'd ask him fast, I'd ask him slow. I'd ask him one time, then I'd ask him another time, and I'd ask him a different way. I'll let your memories reflect how many times I asked John Biggerstaff and how many different ways I asked him whether he helped Mr. Fernandez participate in this murder. His answer was no, 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 every single time. I didn't call John Biggerstaff as a witness. The government did. They're acting like we called an incredible person and you should hold that against us. They called him, and then in first closing, they got up and said, as a liar. Well, I didn't call him. He doesn't connect my client to that firearm. Maybe he is a liar. Maybe he did keep his gun. Maybe he doesn't want to be arrested for being a convicted felon and go back to federal prison. I have no idea. But the one thing I'm certain of is that John Biggerstaff, Juan Biggerstaff, or Fred Barton never mentioned Mario Fernandez in connection to that 10 millimeter firearm. So why did they put all these people up there for one gun that's not connected to this homicide to have you learn that there is no connection to Mr. Fernandez? Ask yourself what the point of all of this was. This is a first-degree murder case. The consequences are real. There has to be evidence. There has to be connections. There isn't a single one related to John Biggerstaff's 10 millimeter firearm or any other 10 millimeter firearm other than one was used in this homicide. And there's not a shred of evidence that Mr. Fernandez ever owned a 10 millimeter firearm, was in possession of a 10 millimeter firearm, was seen in a photo with a 10 millimeter firearm, was seen at a gun range with a 10 millimeter firearm. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Is he a law enforcement officer and he's credible? Is he not credible? I don't know. I didn't call him as a witness. The government did. You have to ask yourself what the purpose was and why. I don't care. He doesn't connect, other than he acknowledges that Mr. Fernandez helped him set up for his wedding. So when they say, God, it's so weird that on the 15th he would be with wrongdoers, he's not with wrongdoers. He's with a guy whose son came into town to get married, and Mr. Fernandez helped him bring tables and chairs to his wedding, confirmed by Juan Biggerstaff. That's what you learned from Juan Biggerstaff as to why Mr. Fernandez may have seen these people, Juan and John Biggerstaff, around the time of the homicide, because he got married at the time of the homicide. And you don't have to take these guys' word for it because they think they're liars. I asked Detective Johns, did you find receipts from the tables and chair place? He's like, yes, they picked up tables and chairs. The cellular data confirmed that Mr. Fernandez was with John Biggerstaff at the tables and chair storage place and a delivery was made. This isn't like some made-up story. That's what the evidence is. But they don't tell you that. They tell you, well, it's suspicious the night before the homicide he was with John Biggerstaff. When they know the evidence is he was helping him set up for a wedding. It's not suspicious they'd have communications. And the school teacher didn't provide a ton of evidentiary value, with the exception of, she said, there was some theme that this was some kind of fake marriage, that from 2018 until 2022, Mr. Fernandez was some kind of contract marriage with Shanna Gardner. But he knows all the kids' medications. He does pickups and drop-offs. He goes to all the school projects and school performances. The school knows him. He was the first person with Miss Shanna Gardner to introduce themselves to the head of school. That's the purpose. That's ludicrous, that they somehow hired Mr. Fernandez and then 4 years later to do a contract killing and he just integrates himself into the family and the schools and the communities, and that's why we called the teachers. That's why we called Ms. Orpitsberger, who also, by the way, said 7 o'clock on a Wednesday, the community would report suspicious activity. And they want you to believe there was all this suspicious activity with a truck and Mr. Fernandez running back and forth, if you want to believe that theory. Next. Then you heard from Detective Chris Johns, who went through the financials, and you heard Mrs. Stifler in her opening statement, and this could not be more important, and she looked at all of you. I saw many of you write it down. It will be in your notes because I watched you, because when I heard the words come out of her mouth, I can tell you I know this case pretty good. I know the evidence in this case. I know the records. And when I heard the words come out of her mouth, I almost fell out of my chair. You heard what she said. There is... Wait.
A week after Jared Bridegan's death,
Yeah,
Okay, hold on. Pause. Let me pause it. Let me see.